welcome to episode 309 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources, so whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast or on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and our email address is schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. It is now my pleasure to introduce Learnix, which is our newest podcast sponsor. If you are overwhelmed with managing student research projects and wish that there were a better way to guide students towards credible sources and ethical research practices, then you need to try Learnix. Learnix automatically documents your students' research journeys, capturing their searches, website visits, and notes. Learnix then organizes the students' notes, creates perfectly formatted bibliographies, and even generates a snapshot report that reveals key insights into how the student conducts research. With Learnix, you can provide personalized feedback, identify research challenges, and teach information literacy skills more effectively. Visit Learnix.com to learn more and schedule a demo. Enjoy Learnix for the remainder of the year at half the price. And if you mention that you heard about Learnix on School Librarians United, you'll receive 20% off your subscription. And now for today's episode, Students as Staff, and my conversation with Bridget Bryson. Bridget Bryson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Friends, Bridget and I met at GLMA Summer Institute last year. Would you introduce yourself to listeners and let us know about your library, the grades you serve, and what does your schedule look like?
Sure. Well, first of all, just to get it out of the way, I'm originally from the UK, so that's why I talk a little strangely at times. I teach at a middle school in Alpharetta, Georgia. I am still officially a teacher librarian, just finishing up my degree. I've got my big GACE in spring break, so that's kind of exciting. I'll be able to call myself a media specialist. So we are grades 6 to 8. I have a flexible schedule that I schedule. So actually have made some changes this year to streamline that a little because it was a little overly flexible, shall we say. And yeah, so I just have a lot of fun in my space. We call it the Media and Learning Center, the MLC, just because that's probably what I'll throw in. So I'll say that now.
Awesome. All right. First of all, never apologize for your accent. And there's nothing strange about it. I don't remember that I have an accent, but every once in a while I meet people. I was like, wow. And they say, no, Amy, you sound like a newscaster. I was like, okay. All right. We'll go with that, I guess. Well, and, I got to tell you, what makes us unique is never something we apologize for. So I'm really have to ask you, what did you mean by too flexible when you said that your schedule is a little too flexible?
So I'm one of those people who always wants to be, I think most librarians are like this. We want to be everything for everyone. And so you want it, I'm there. You've got it, right? I'm going to make it work. And we have, we're lucky, I believe our children are very lucky that they have reading classes in 6th and 7th grade. And I kind of was like, whenever you want to come. And then if teachers wanted to collaborate with me and teach, I feel very blessed that I do a lot of that. And it's like, whenever you want me to teach. And so the end of last year, I nearly lost my para, my aide clerk, whatever, just because she'd had enough, bless her heart, because Bridget is chaos. That is like my middle name. And so she found it really hard. And so I had already kind of realized that and made a decision to streamline. The irony is I'm losing her anyway this year, but at least we had one really wonderful organized year to prep me for next year. So what I mean by that is reading classes, they come in Monday, Tuesday, and Friday are the days, and I do everything I can to protect them. And then, so pretty solidly, we'll have 2 classes coming in every period. And then Wednesday and Thursday are my teaching days. And so, unless we have a strange schedule, pet rally, something odd, those days are either my catch-up due days or they are my teaching days. And, as we all know, when you have those weeks where you're teaching back to back for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, it's kind of a killer. But it has kept things organized and it really has protected those time for my reading classes because they need that. They need to know that they are coming in with their kids this week and checking in and out books, or they need to know that they're coming in and Mrs. Bryson's giving book talks today. So that has kept things on a much more even keel. And I sort of know what's happening when I wake up in the morning, which is, sometimes is a surprise to me. And halfway through the day, that will change. But, at least we start. I always say I am very flexible as long as I begin with a plan.
All right. All right. Well, I'm hearing a couple things here. First of all, you're absolutely right. Something's got to give. So when you are that hyper flexible and people know that you can stop, drop, and do whatever comes through the door, you are already ready to support them and their needs. But what I'm really incredibly aware of in just hearing you talk about this is how committed your building is to sustaining that reading culture that probably came in when those incoming students came in, those 6th graders came in. They probably came to you with a strong sense of a reading culture from their elementary schools, and you're just keeping that momentum going with all those reading classes that are coming in to sustain that reading culture.
Sure. I mean, we didn't have them. We've had one teacher who's amazing, Jean Ortiz, who has been pushing and pushing and kept getting denied and denied. And like 3 years ago, I think it actually coincided with me taking over in the media center, which was kind of perfect. She got that position. Our teachers have strong voices and they're listened to. We're very lucky in that in our old principal, our new principal, particularly our current principal. And he really listened. The teachers said, we need someone in the library. And before that, I know, right? It was a para. I don't want to say just a para because she worked hard, but it's different, right? And so they brought me in and I came in with all these intents and goals. Same time the reading program started. Our focus in the county is literacy. The last couple of years, and I literally had a conversation with my principal the other day where I said, now I just want to remind you that our focus is literacy, and yet I have not been included in a single conversation, and I feel like that's my job. And he's like, yeah, you're right, it really is. So, and that's not a complaint. That's just a reality that I'm not in those meetings, right? And it's sort of like, oh yeah, she kind of does that thing. I know, but we have to advocate for ourselves, right? And so yes, we built a really cool culture, and one of my things has been since day one of my passions has been is our biggest asset is our kids, and our kids want us to fight for them, and our kids want to do for themselves as well. And I think we overlook that. And when I first was fortunate enough to get offered this position, which by the way was a perfect storm and is a whole nother podcast, I sat down with 2 groups. One was the reading teachers, the future reading teachers, and one was students. And to say, what do I need to do? Because to me, that's my market. And I, in some ways, and it's funny, I go to all these meetings and I'm always hearing, we need a qualified, certified media specialist, and it shouldn't be just a teacher. And no one means it that way, but you know what I'm saying. And I agree. That's why I'm getting my media certification. But on the other hand, if that had been the rule in our county, I would never have been lucky enough to get this position. And I came in as an ELA teacher with a lot of goals about what should be happening in our media center. And it was almost the fact that I wasn't quite sure really helped me go to the people who were sure and find out, what do I need to do for your staff? What do I need to do for you students? How do you want to see this happening? And everything kind of grew organically from there.
Well, and I love that literacy is not just a building priority, but also a priority of your county. And whenever we are supporting the goals that have been, I don't want to say imposed, but have been handed to the individual buildings, you are part of the solution. You are helping your principal look good, and you become those data points for your principal to then say, yes, we are doing this, this, and this. And by which I mean we. Obviously, you are part of that solution. That's huge. I love that you're getting buy-in from your stakeholders and recognizing that students should be very much part of that conversation. A side note, I remember going to a job interview, and part one was meeting with the adults and part two was meeting with the students. And it shouldn't throw us when that happens. It really shouldn't. But it did. But it did.
Yeah, no, I bet. I would have been like, whoa, unexpected. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And then, the fact that you are asking those important questions so that you can advocate for your stakeholders. You're becoming a better school librarian. You have a much better sense of what you need to do because you have that clear line of communication with your students. Before we get on today's topic of students as staff, friends, you do not want to miss out. Bridget has spent a considerable amount of effort populating an amazing website and resource, which should be bookmarked for so many of us who are tuning in right now. It's called Magical Media Mayhem. And I realized when I was looking at this and learning about you and appreciating just how invested you are in our profession that we could have talked on any number of topics. You've included 4 full presentations, 12 different lessons, the beginning of your orientation stations, as well as posters and multiple reading challenges. You've thrown everything out there for anybody to immerse themselves and get a much clearer sense of the kind of program that you run, but then offering it up, no paywall, no gratitude expected. Nobody has to buy you a coffee.
Well, everything I got from someone else. I'm a big believer in that. And I am quite sure that there will be several people that I'm on Blue Sky with, that I used to be on Twitter with, that I talk to frequently, who'll go, hey, I did that, right? So I apologize right now, because anyone who had a good idea, I'm going to use it. Like unless you tell me I can't, I'm going to use it. And I think that's how we're all better. And side note, I literally have just put my slideshows up there. There is no lesson plan. So if you look at it and you think you like something, just drop me an email. That'll be on the show notes later. And I'm more than happy to share what the mayhem involved.
Well, a rising tide lifts all boats. So when the amazing school librarians of Georgia make it so easy for the rest of us to learn from what they've done with great success in your state. Friends, if you ever have the liberty of picking up and settling someplace, if you want to be a school librarian with a really fantastic support group around you, Georgia Library Media Association is mind-blowingly together. You've got all your stuff together. And I had a chance to meet you all last summer. It was fantastic. So, it is fair to say that there are quite a few people who are going to want to spend some time on the resources that you have included on your website. It really does make a difference for the rest of us tuning in, especially if we've got somebody just looking for inspiration.
Sure. And, there's always more to add. Like when you first told me you're going to share it, I was like, oh, it's a little out of date, right? So I've got new stuff to add, and again, stuff that I borrowed from people and used and either made my own or just blatantly borrowed.
But I love the idea that this isn't a competition. This isn't about making sure that Bridget's the best school librarian out there. This is about making sure that when librarians are looking for support, you've got a librarian here who's willing to share it. And yes, we all incorporate our past experiences and what we've done. And the fact is that if we've got a school librarian who's tuning in right now, who uses some of the great ideas you've put out there, that is making sure that we as a profession have a much better chance of weathering whatever comes to us, especially here in the United States, in the next 4 years. So, friends, today's conversation is all about how the students in Bridget's school have come to take on some essential roles in the library. So, Bridget, would you mind telling us how long did it take for the current iteration that you have in your space right now to evolve and take shape?
And it really is like an ever changing every year, because so much will depend on your schedule. So much will depend on what your administration lets you do. You always have to ask for best case and then settle for what you get. And the very first thing I did, as I said earlier, was talk to students. I actually talked to them before the end of the year, and then I had a summer camp with some kids that had applied and been selected to be on the team, and for them to come up with ideas, because as soon as it's their idea, they're so engaged and involved, and then they advertise for you. So it's sort of a win-win. But to start with, I'll kind of go with where I'm at this year, because it's changed every year, and then I'll sort of talk about next year. This year, I've had a homeroom. We've had what they call flex time, like a sort of a 30 minutes before, 35 minutes at the beginning of each day. And we have a homeroom, and the children can select where they are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And that was last year. It was fantastic. Flex time lasted 45 minutes. We got a lot of stuff done. And I had a group of kids that wanted to be with me every day. This year has not been as powerful. We only had 35 minutes, and this year we had a lot more mandatory stuff we had to do with our homeroom. So we kind of sort of got nothing done. Great kids, right? And they got involved in other ways, but it basically was like, I could have got something done instead of showing kids a video that all teachers had to show their homeroom that day, which again is fine. But next year they're changing it again. And so I talked to our principal and I said, look, I'm not going to do the committee. We're going to figure out something else. But it was there this year. And then the other thing I've had is our student aides. And our student aides were hand selected. There's no other way about it. As I told teachers, and in fact, I need to look at the website, what I had there on my application. But my original application did evolve in that I put on there very clearly, this is not a role for kids who you think it would be good for. This is not about the kids. This is about me and the library. And that was really important, because the first year I'd have these applicants and I'm like, oh, honey, such a great kid. And I really want to do this for them. But let's see if we can find a different role, because I was not going to be able to give this kid a task and 30 minutes later come back and see how they were doing. I need those driven library kids. We all know what our library kids are. I want the kids who want to make the library better. That was kind of what I needed. And so I've got much better in my choices. Teachers have got much better in their recommendations. And I have a really good bunch of kids. Next year, I'll be continuing that. Not having a para means that I'm actually going to add slightly to my numbers. So I'm going to have a group of 6 7th graders and 6 8th graders. So 3 can be little mini-me's each day, and 3 can be doing the creative things, and then they can switch and swap so everyone feels like they're doing a little bit of everything. They even have badges that says I'm a library aide, and they can help the reading teachers and yeah, so there's some training involved for sure, and there's some kids who never quite get there. But there's other kids. I mean, we just did a blind date with a book, which I know many people did. Side note, I was just visiting my daughter in Fremantle, Perth, where the original blind date with a book store is, and they never patented it, and they're really regretting that decision. But it's gorgeous, right? And they do it just some subtle tweaks that we did, and I'll add those pictures eventually to my website. And the kids did it, and they said, how many should I do? Well, we did one last year, and nothing really happened. So I was like, I don't know, do like 18, right? So they filled the display, and then 24 hours later, they were like, Mrs. Bryson, they've all gone. And so for 2 weeks, those kids every day were coming in and rapping and writing their bulleted summaries and checking the genre and writing the code on the back. I mean, completely self-sufficient. And that's the kind of thing I can't do on my own. I totally cannot do it. So they can bring so much extra to what I do. I also have a couple of other little groups. I have what I call my library ambassadors, and they're basically the kids that didn't get to do anything but always want to help. And that's totally volunteer. They'll stay after school, they'll come before school, they'll help me set up makerspace in the morning. They vacuum, they love vacuuming. I love this. And then my genre genies. My genre genies come in once a week, and that's a group. Every genre, depending on the size, has 2 to 3 kids, and they come and they rotate the display every week. And so that there's always different, well, that's the goal. I mean, they're not all, but they rotate and they get to make their own little contests and riddles. And like, we now have a mystery riddle of the week just because we had one kid who said, "Can I do a riddle each week?" And I said, "Why, yes, you can." And they said, "Do you have a prize you can give Mrs. Bryson?" I said, "They can get a piece of candy." And it all went from there. And so those kids are, and some of them are double, triple dipping, right? Some of them are in all the things. Others, they're just very serious about their genre, and they have a little nameplate up there, a little name card that says, "This genre is brought to you by Amy Herman." And they love that, and they take great pride. And sometimes we have to explain to them that you have to actually be able to look at the cover of a book or see the spine, that it looks very pretty, but I have to move it to get to other books. But they're middle schoolers. They really do just want to please, and they're very proud of their work.
There's so much to unpack here, friends. Yes, we are going to go into some detail. That's the beauty of a podcast. So, first of all, I just have to just say, Bridget said, and I feel this to my core, and I know that there are a lot of us who heard you say this, administrators let us do something. And I got to tell you, you said administrators, when they let us do something. And isn't it so true that there's so many things that unfortunately without the support of our administrators, we would not be able to do. I'm going to say across the board, award-winning programs. And when I have spoken to school librarians who have received amazing national recognition for what they do, and their spaces have received that national recognition, the absolute essential ingredient, including having a certified school librarian in the place, is also having an administrator who supports them. Never have I ever interviewed somebody with a phenomenal program, and then they said, "Yeah, my principal doesn't even know I exist." I just like that. Those two things cannot happen in the same space.
I agree. I also think, though, too, sometimes we're culpable of not making that statement. I guess one thing I didn't say was, my aides are a class, right? They're a connections class. Last year, I had one in every class, and that was a nightmare. I'm not surprised my clerk wanted to quit. Because I'm busy and she gets dumped with them, right? And that's not her idea to have these children. So I completely understand. Although, don't get me wrong, she completely understands the benefit of them too, but it got a little out of control. So we also had 6th grade ones at the beginning of the second semester, which we didn't do this year, utilizing those in different ways. So it is 2 connections classes out of the 6 potential ones that we could be having, that I have those aides in there. But what I was going to say, it's amazing to me how many people I've talked to when I've done the presentation, or I've just talked to generally at different things, who say, "Well, my principal won't let me do that." And I always follow up with, "Did you ask?" "Well, no, because I know they won't let me do that." And I'm like, I get that, but I have got things, for want of better way of putting it, because I've asked, when I've gone in with a sinking feeling that I'm not going to get it, but I won't live with myself unless I try, because I know this is for the benefit of the whole school. And I think sometimes we think things are for us, but when we think it through, sure, they're for us, but what we do benefits every single student in the school. So, even the kids that don't like to read love to come to the MLC. They love to hang out in there. So whatever I do, it's a benefit to someone. And so sometimes I think we need to remember that. And if you don't think your principal will let you have aides in connections classes, have you asked? Is there another alternative? Do you maybe have like a flex time period? some middle schools have recess. I mean, we don't, but some do. Like other times when you would be able to do that, because I think people have more opportunity. I know I have more opportunity than I realize. I just have to open my mouth and ask, and I'm getting better at it.
Sometimes I would say the squeaky librarian gets what they want, It's just that persistence. When we advocate, it's not because we are looking for that personal, gratification. We're looking to benefit our entire building. And whenever we do something, we have that ripple effect of potentially impacting so many more people beyond the walls of our program. So let me clarify, just because you talked a little bit about flex time and you talked about a connections class, and those are not the same thing, correct?
Correct. So flex time is sort of a 35-minute block each day. A lot of schools do this in our county, and they use it for sort of relearn time. We have our clubs during that time. It's kind of it's not free time for sure. The kids have to sign up for something, but it is flex time. It's flexible, and it's been very useful for me to be able to do like reading bowl and to be able to have I host the Pride Club and things like that. Next year, sadly, we're losing it. Again, a topic for another podcast. Kids getting fun time taken away. Anyhow, so connections is, I think in some elementary schools they call it specials. It's kind of like your art, your band, your PE, your health, business and marketing, like all those things happen, and each of our grade levels get two classes a day that are connections back to back. And so that's when I have my aides. I also do yearbook. So I also have yearbook during that time. Yeah, I know. During that time frame. So that's another podcast for another day. That was one of those classic. We want to give you a choice. You can either have a daily connections class or you can do yearbook. And yearbook seems to fit an awful lot more in with what I do than a daily class that I'd have to make up, do grades, et cetera, and be tied down to. Like my yearbook kids are very well trained, just like my aides. I mean, they're 8th graders, so as trained as I can have them, and they will sit relatively quietly and do their work while I'm teaching a class. I couldn't do that if I had a class of 30 in there. So it works. Anyway, so that's the difference between the two. The connections is so instead of having PE, they are a library aid.
Got it. Wow. I mean, that's, and every school does it differently. And what it comes down to is instructional time, and that every building is required to have a certain number of clock hours. At least that's the way it is in Michigan, that we have to have a certain amount of clock hours per day to come up with the number of clock hours of instructional time at the end of the year. And so it has to be considered instructional time for it to, count. So no, I see why that happens. I just have to ask, because I love all of the different titles that you have for your teams of students. Could you break down the difference between a library aide, an ambassador, and a genre genie?
Sure. Well, first of all, the aides is a class, and the other two are strictly volunteer. So I think that's kind of a basic difference. And the other two, honestly, kind of grew out of what do I do with all these kids who applied to be aides and don't have jobs. And I needed to make them feel important. So I created titles. That was kind of, the initial thinking there. The aides, because I do have them for a full class, so I have them for 50 minutes every day. We do a lot more with them, obviously. The 7th grade aides do kind of all the bits and pieces. So we have a fairly structured calendar, and again, that sort of evolves, and we're kind of getting a pattern going. But they do everything from each month putting a calendar on the wall and celebrating different authors, to creating book walks, which is our internal version of a story walk. They do monthly crafts, monthly contests. Next year, they're going to have to help with the bulletin board. They help update our library website, which is not my website, but the school website that no one really looks at, but we're working on it. And they do all those things. The 8th grade, be careful with the 8th grade. They're not quite they need to buy in a little bit more. So they do the video work, they do the social media campaign, which we're working on. They do the Green and Blue News, which is a monthly sort of 5 to 10 minute video that goes out to all of the school for what's coming next, what's happening next month, not just in the MLC, but in the school. And they interview kids and they do trivia and so on and so forth. So the 8th grade, we try and keep it a much more sort of adult creative thing. And they'll also, next year, I'm really going to push the 8th grade on the website because I think they'll really, really enjoy that. Whereas the 7th grade would rather do a lot of the more tangible, hands-on, instantly seen type of thing. And the big thing for both groups is that if they come up with a better idea, we do the better idea. That's one thing that, even though sometimes I have to bite my tongue, I've been very strict about with myself, is that if the kids want to do it, we do it. Because number one, it's such a great learning experience for them. And I tell them they are staff, right? They have to have pride or embarrassment, and however things go, it's up to them too. So they really focus on that. They amaze me consistently that they'll come to me and they'll be like, Mrs. Bryson, nobody did the tic-tac-toe this month. What are we going to do? And we sit down and we have a meeting and we take notes and we say, was it really nobody or did you just see nobody? Because I saw this. And then we'll talk about the fact that they forgot to do a promotional slide with scrolling slides outside our room. And I give them sort of directions and instructions, but if they don't do it, unless it's vital, 9 times out of 10, I'll kind of just let it slide and we'll see. And typically they'll be like, no one knew it was happening. I'll be like, oh, I wonder why. And then we'll talk about doing maybe overhead announcements. Should we have the principal announce that so-and-so won it? Because if kids hear someone won a prize, they want a prize too. And so it's really interesting watching them evolve as marketing people, as creative people. I mean, it really is cool. I had one parent who say that they kind of didn't want their kid to be an aide because it wasn't graded. And so I've always been, back in my teaching days, I was the anti-grader. So let's just put it that way. And so I have all the arguments. So I sat down with them and I talked about how, in real life, we're graded on how well we do, not by a number. We're not defined each month by a number. And so they are graded on the success of an entire building in the school. And other than yearbook, it's the only real job they can do here. And they were like, wow. And it's true, right? I wasn't saying anything that wasn't true. So that's the aids. That's the heavy hitters, if you like.
I love that there is so much room for student agency. It sounds like you are willing to see how the students creatively solve the problems that evolve throughout the school year.
I think the key is you have to have a plan, right? So it's kind of like, I think I said that earlier, I'm flexible as long as I have a plan. You have to have a plan because they're young, they're kids, right? They come in one day, they're bouncing, the next day did you sleep last night, right? So there has to be kind of this is what we're doing today, but there also has to be an understanding of, unless you have a better idea. And they really, some groups, everything's collaborative. Other groups, everything's individual. They divide and conquer. The group of 7th graders I have right now, it seems to vary by the task. Some tasks are all in it together. Other times they all separate up and do it individually. And that's fine. Like, as long as it's done, it's like a real workspace. You make it work. And that to me is the key for them. And although there are times that I kind of smile behind my desk or behind my bookshelf, I try and treat them seriously. Every now and again, I'll turn into the teacher because, you just have to. But I really do try my utmost to let them feel empowered, that it is their space to make as great as they can make it.
I love how candid you are in your presentation. And friends, absolutely, I actually didn't get to see Bridget present because I was at a different session. But I love that you include 2 slides in here, slide 11 and slide 17, about the lessons you've learned. And I think we're always, I say self-critical, but I think a better description is we're so reflective on what we do in our practice. And I love this, that you are fine sharing those realizations with the rest of in this case, your audience at your session, for the benefit of learning from the things that you have already figured it out. I've got slide number 11 right now. When it comes to, is this about the aid program that you were just describing?
So that is actually when I had the homeroom.
Okay.
So from this year, that 30 kids was just chaos. I mean, it's just, it was. And I'm not going to have a homeroom next year, so things change. But I came down to 20 kids, walked in August going, this is going to be amazing. And then found that they'd cut the time by 10 minutes. And as anyone in education knows, 10 minutes is huge. And during that 35 minutes we have them, they also have to sign up for all of their flex time periods for the week. So that involves getting out Chromebooks. That involves putting Chromebooks away. I mean, we know all the things. So instead of 45 minutes of clear time, I suddenly ended up with about 15 minutes. However, if you are lucky enough to get a group, a larger group, then yes, I strongly recommend 20 is about the maximum at any one time, because 20 you can split up, say, into 4 groups. And have one group working on the bulletin board, one group working on an event, one group you can do that and manage that. But 30 was just too many.
So I love this next one. Trying to assign doesn't work as well as choice. And I think that it connects with me as an adult, because I completely say, yes, if somebody gave me a choice or somebody assigned me to do something, there is this natural pushback when we are told what we are doing. And I think if we take a lesson from ourselves and apply it to the young people we work with, yes, agency is important. Giving people a choice is important, even if it's contrived, even if you're giving a this or that, it is still going to have more success. I love that.
Well, look, I said, I'm finishing up my master's right now, and I think I am alike with every single other educator in the world, that when we take classes, whether it's a master's, whether it's a fitness class, right? You sit there and you're like, oh my God, I do this to the kids. Or, oh my God, no wonder the kids feel the way they do, right? Because we forget that we also like to have choice, that we also, I mean, this is off topic a little bit, but it's like I was in a class the other day and the instructor gave like 5 million instructions. And then we got started and I couldn't remember the first thing. Like, what was the first thing we were supposed to do? And I was like, oh, do I do that to my kids? Right? Because we do. We're like, do this, do this, do this, do this. Right. Do you have any questions? No, go. So I just feel like as educators, we need to be aware of that all the time. Like we are human beings. They are human beings, albeit little and sometimes maybe a little annoying. They are small, they're kids, but they're humans and they want choice. They want to be heard. If they're struggling, they don't want to be treated like an idiot, which maybe that's a bit strong, but you need to be able to recap instructions just like you would expect to have them recapped. They need to see a written version. They're different kinds of learners, right? So, I've always tried to, one of the things that we consistently do and consistently update, in fact, I have a student working on this right now, is checklists, right? So if we have a task, it might be really quick, but let's have a checklist of how it's supposed to be done. And 90% of the time, the kids don't read the checklists. 99% of the time, I say to the kids, hey, do you want to go back and check on the checklist? Because I think you missed a step.
I love this because you're right. For so many of us, we are in graduate school, getting a master's, getting a certificate. And if we are ourselves students, we are not so far removed from that role as students. And while graduate school is a long time ago for me, I still do participate in a lot of professional development workshops and workshops that extend over a period of time. And so for that brief period of time, you are back to being are relegated to being a student in that role. And we have to remember what it's like to be a student in order for us to be tuned into how those learning preferences are going to impact how readily accepting there are of the roles that we have in our spaces. You did mention here also the summer retreat, and you mentioned that at the beginning of the conversation. What are you talking about when you mention a summer retreat?
So all the kids who've already committed to be volunteered in the following year, I have last year I had 2 days actually, one at the beginning of the summer and one at the end of the summer, and they come to school, which they're just like uber excited about coming to school when no one else is there. It's a big, huge deal. And our principal again, Mr. Sargent, God bless him, he covered the pizza both times, and they had pizza. So again, pizza. No one else is in the school. I mean, there's so many things. And the first day is all about brainstorming. What would we like to do? Money's no issue, right? Like in a perfect world, what can we bring into the library? And it's amazing how you can fill a day doing that. But they get into groups, they come up, get the butcher paper. Is actually funny. Our ed tech specialist and ITS person had all the Chromebook carts out. So we put all the butcher paper all across the top of the Chromebook carts, and they all got like their markers, and they all just wrote ideas, and then they rotated. And I think last year, if I remember rightly, I'd split them into like 4 groups, and one was events, one was contests. Don't remember what the other 2 were, but they were like 4 groups. And so they could only focus on the group ideas. And then they rotated and looked at other people's ideas and added to them. And then they rotated. So they had like the 4 rotations. And then at the end of the day, I had kids volunteer to type it all up. So I typed it all up because none of them actually did. Well, I think one did. Don't be unfair, Bridget. I think one did. But we added like a spreadsheet and had it all up. So the second time we met and we just went through each idea and which was realistic, which was not, which we had votes on ones that were similar. We merged ideas, and things like the Harry Potter camp were born. And then we had to have a Percy Jackson camp, because if we had a Harry Potter camp, we had to have a Percy Jackson camp, right? So all these different ideas came together. I think my very, very favorite, because this was completely student driven, and I still think some teachers don't realize, is they wanted to do a teacher appreciation day. And so they got students to write notes. They made sure every single staff member, from the custodians, the cafe, teachers, admin, got at least one personal handwritten note. And they came in with candy. They came in with cookies. We set up the media center. The staff, all they were told was there was a surprise. And then we had to make announcements like, teachers, remember your surprise, come to the media center. And they all did, and they were blown away. And my kids all greeted at the door. We put out a red carpet. They just like, I taught them all how to hand, how to go arm in arm with someone to bring them into a special space. And it was brilliant. It was like the best, like 45 minutes before school ever. And the teachers all got a gift, and it was 100% kid designed, kid driven. We might not have had time to do that if I had waited to the school year to start. So those are the kind of things that when you put that little bit of extra time in, and I know not everyone is lucky enough to be where I am. I don't have young kids. I can take that day. I can go to the library and be there, and I certainly wouldn't expect anyone else to do that unless they were able to and motivated. But it 100% made a difference for me, because I start the beginning of the year with a plan. Does everything on the plan get done? No. But we get close. We get mighty, mighty close.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Slides 6 and 7 are examples of what this looks like. It looks like you've got all of this buy-in from different students are coming at this. And I love that it's no tech. Like, I think it's so easy for us to, you mentioned that the kids were, ironically, writing their ideas on top of the technology, using the Chromebook carts as a writing surface. That's hilarious, first of all. And yeah.
And I think what's funny, if I remember rightly, I don't think a single kid suggested getting out the Chromebooks. They they enjoyed this, and they enjoyed being able to see each other's work. They enjoyed um, kind of the confusion of it. They enjoyed using colors, right? Like, can I be magenta? Of course you can be magenta, right? I think, and I get that, and I sometimes I'm careful because I'm like, ooh, maybe it's just because I'm old, or older. But to me, there was so much more power in them writing the things, and they all remembered the things. And if I remember rightly, research says when you write it down, you're more likely to remember it. And it was a very powerful activity that they really enjoyed. And it was just like anything when they stopped writing. It was kind of back to my writing teacher days, where just write anything. Just write. It doesn't matter. It could be the stupidest idea on earth, but we might make it great. And then they just started writing anything. And some of the ideas were kind of out there. And I wish I was a billionaire and I would make them happen. But, I mean, sometimes you can have that fantastic idea and bring it down to something that's doable. And that's cool.
Well, and I love, so much of what you're talking about becomes a lot less daunting when you realize that the inspiration for what you're doing comes from the kids. And I think that's really important because I think that for anybody who does not currently have some similar type of program in place, has oftentimes felt the burden of what do I do now when the answer is right in front of you, because the kids will fill in those kinds of, they'll answer those questions if you're willing to hear them out.
Well, and if they have the idea, they're motivated. And when they're motivated, they sell it for you. And when they're motivated, they come and they bring their friends. Um, it's like a good friend of mine, Holcomb Bridge Middle here in Georgia, Lindsay. She has this lunch bunch that she does, and that she got the idea from somewhere. And anyways, the person I originally got the idea from, and I'm afraid I can't remember their name, I apologize. It was definitive books that they read together. And so I started doing that, and I really wasn't getting the kids. And the kids started saying, can we just read what we want? And I'm thinking that's not the point of it. Well, then Lindsay is like, no, I just do a free read and it's out of control. And so I'm like, yep, what? All right, I'm just going to merge the two. And so now we have Lunch Bunch, and I have 20 extremely vociferous sixth graders who come in and own the media center every Tuesday and Friday lunchtime. And some of them do the shared book, and the rest of them do their own book. And they don't care. They just want to be in the media center. And, if I hadn't listened to the kids and then reached out to friends, we would not have had that iteration, and I would still have the two kids who were coming. So I think, that willingness to listen to peers, that willingness to listen to the kids is just the key, because things that I'm excited about at 58, they're not excited about at 11.
Well, things that I learn at 55.
Right. Exactly.
Trust me, you have another slide dedicated to lessons I have learned. And what I hate to throw in these words, but growth mindset versus fixed mindset, like so much of what we do.
Oh, for sure.
We have to have this growth mindset and this idea that if you come in there with hard and fast, like fixed ideas of what this program is going to look like, I think it prohibits you from being able to tap that potential that your students are willing to give you. But they also need permission. They need to know that they're in a space that's safe, that they can throw those ideas out.
Absolutely.
And know that there's a chance that they're going to be able to see elements of what they want in this space coming to fruition.
Well, I always chuckle a little because our school sort of mantra that we hear all the time is safe, connected, and thriving. And I'm like, that's us, right? That is what the media center is. We are the safe space, we connect, and we thrive through that safety and that connection. And that's like our little school thing that our principal says every day. I'm sure there's a more official word than thing, but it works for me right now. So, I'm like, that's exactly what we are. We're safe, we're connected, we're thriving, and you don't get the one without the other, in my opinion. And the kids have really, really done well with it. And when you say the flexibility, I think that's incredibly true. I just had my interest meetings for next year. I was going over kind of the plan, and the kids, being kids, are asking for definitives. And it's as I'm answering them, I'm realizing in my brain that I'm getting much better, like I'm evolving, getting much better at realizing, well, this is what I'm visualizing, but it might be completely different according to what aids I have. And of course, their brains explode with that kind of comment. But I'm like, look, guys, I'm saying there's going to be 6 of you, and 3 of you are going to be my mini-me's. You're going to be working on updating displays, shelving books, helping our clients. I like to call them clients because the kids think that's great. While the other 3 are working on the creative stuff. And I'm like, in my mind, you're probably switching every week. It might turn out you're switching every day. There might be one of you who just wants to do that. And there might be one of you who never wants to do that, right? So I'm like, although I want everyone to know how to do all the things, and there might be some days where I'm like, there is no choice. We just had 2 reading classes in. We had no parent volunteers today. We have 100 books to shelve. We're all shelving books today. That might be the day. On the other day, there might be nothing and no classes. So I'm like, we're all being creative today, right? So I'm like, you kids, it's just like my job. And I say to them, do you ever come in and see me doing the same thing every time you come in? No. Well, that's going to be your world. And they, some of them are excited by that, and some of them are slightly terrified. So, because they don't know what they're committing to, right? And it's like, no, I didn't either when I took this job. So we just, that's how we learn. We trial and error.
So many things. So first of all, safe, connected, thriving. I'm sorry, but it is packaging, but it allows you to see how your space, if that's the building mantra, if that's the building, theme of safe, connected, thriving, it is not hard to imagine how the library satisfies all 3 of those goals. Because we excel at this, at creating that safe space, giving the students an opportunity to connect with everything that's in that space, and then growing because you've sort of set the scene, and the kids can find ways to fulfill what it is they want to do.
My principal's always been supportive, right? Like he's supportive of every staff member. He's one of those principals who understands you have families and lives, and he's a great guy. But to some extent, we did put ourselves on the map. Like I didn't necessarily, yes, I got things like the AIDS, and but we kind of created the belief. I think sometimes that the 2 things have to work at the same time. I'm very conscious that not everyone has that supportive principal, and I always want to be very careful because I don't want anyone to switch off and say, I'm not going to be able to do this. Because I think sometimes you can do the things that build the picture that principal's going to make the turnaround. And I've seen that happen with friends of mine. One of our defining moments was actually a weird moment, and actually an inappropriate moment as a media specialist in regards to watching TV. It's okay, nothing that inappropriate. So the World Cup was on, right? The World Cup was on. It's the summer. I am insane about soccer, and over a third of our students are of Hispanic heritage, and many of our local Georgia kids play soccer. I mean, it's a huge sport, right? So the World Cup is on at a time when we're at school, which never happens. Like it was only because it was in Qatar. It was just a one-off. And so I showed it in the library. And we broke fire code on a daily basis. I had to finally stop them from coming in with food. Probably shouldn't have been streaming. But anyway, it was on, happenstance. And I would have like 300 kids lying on top of each other, screaming, yelling. And I will never forget my principal coming in, standing there and saying, "This makes my heart so happy." And I knew at that point that we were aligned in our goals. And it wasn't until that point that I really felt he wants what I want. And so sometimes those things just come together.
You mentioned parent volunteers? Wait a minute.
I did. Parent volunteers. So I have always been nervous about losing my clerk. I mean, it's just a reality. It's something that is going to happen. And I did know last year that she was struggling herself with just the setup. And so I started seeking parent volunteers and got 2 or 3. And the beginning of this year, it was a big focus for me. So I made sure the PTO put it out. I made sure it was in everyone. The school sends like a parent newsletter out every month. And guys, if you're not on there, ask why, because we have so much stuff going on. And so I was able to, I have a section on that newsletter that goes out, and I ask every month for volunteers, whether they can only work from home, which I tried with kind of getting reviews and things for books, but it really hasn't worked, or getting them in. We have a minimum of 1 volunteer come in every day, if not 2. We have some who are very much able to do, like I have 2 helping me with weeding right now. I have 1 checking all the book series and numbering them. And then we have others who really shelving is what they do. And some it's harder, just like the kids, right? It's harder to teach than others. What I'm excited about now is I have a really good base. And I've told the 8th grade parents, like, there's nothing for them to do in high school. They might as well just come back to me next year. So I don't know that they will. One of them said she will, promises to come monthly, and she could run the place. So I would be thrilled with that. But it's given me that sort of feeling that next year when I don't have a clerk, I already have people who know what they're doing. So if I can bring new ones in, they can help train the new ones, because when you're on your own, that's the time consuming thing, right? When you can train people to do the work. I probably, if I was on my own and I didn't have a lovely clerk to do it, I would probably see if they could come after school or right before school or something, because it is 100% worth it. I can have an entire reading class come in and neither my para nor I shelve a single book, because the volunteers are doing it.
Yeah. When I had parent volunteers, I taught elementary, and the parent came when they dropped, when the day began. They parked once, they had their child, they came in the building when the school day started, and I changed how my students returned their books, because I had this other adult, and I had, in this case, I had 6 classes a day, and I would have 6 carts come back to the Learning Commons with books. And so all I had my parent volunteer do is check in those books, and I could start the day knowing that really, by and large, the majority of the books that were going to be coming in that day had already been turned in and already been checked in by my, I called her my assistant, but in this case, it's just a volunteer parent who came, and I developed a very nice trained workforce, because we had 2 book fairs a year. And I would gift them some Scholastic Book Fair dollars right around Christmas, and they could do their Christmas shopping at the book fair. And it all worked out. But you find solutions that fit the program that you have. So I have to ask you on slide number 17. Again, you're sharing with us the things that you've learned. I love here that you do have a sense of needing the rotation of tasks, and that there is an element of training that has to be incorporated, and then building up those habits and routines, because those habits do have to become learned, and you have to train them.
For sure. I mean, the kids have to come in. I mean, like I said, I'm normally or often teaching, or maybe I'm working with yearbook. The goal this year was the 8th grade aides would not be while I was with yearbook, and unfortunately they are, which has been tough. So they have to know that they have to come in and they get straight to work, and it's A, B, C, D. And yes, you're right. It does take some elements of training, elements of to-do lists, right? Like, they know that they look at my whiteboard. Which, by the way, we have a LMS. We use Canvas, and I put stuff on there, but I don't know that they really look at it and check it, right? So if there's that big visual there, and sometimes there are days where really specific things have to be done, and I know I'm not going to be standing right there waiting for them, they know that if it's on the list, they do it. And to be frank, these are great kids. Like, I do pick the best of the best. So they're still kids. So there's still 7th and 8th graders, and we're all going to have our moments. But these are on the whole that the kids that, the teachers trust, that I trust, and trust begets trust, right? So the more I trust them, the more they become trustworthy. I mean, it works hand in hand. And every now and again, we have to sit down and we have to have a meeting and we have to discuss. But on the whole, I mean, I really, really don't. And they, again, with the parent volunteers, sometimes they're working hand in hand with them as well, which is really cool experience. And of course, if you bring parent volunteers, make sure what rules your school has as far as signing off on discussing with students, having access to Destiny or whatever. And one thing I will say, I think when I talk to my middle school peers, there's a lot of kind of shock at the parent volunteers. I think we have a lot more parents longing to be involved. You got to get them while they're hot, right? Like, so I do, last year I started what I called Night at the MLC for our rising sixth graders. And so we invited all of our rising sixth graders. It was a maximum of 50 kids to come. And I had an evening event, and they had to bring a parent, and they weren't allowed to bring their siblings. And that rule was mostly adhered to. And they arrived, and I had my library kids blowing bubbles. They came in on the red carpet, and we did little craft stations. It was just a fun evening. And then we had a little Q&A at the end. Most questions were about lockers and homework, so I wasn't much help to them. But it was really cool for them to get introduced to the library, and I got to talk to the parents. And of course, we had a station about signing up to volunteer and how to stay involved with your child now they're in middle school. And so many of the parents were like, they don't want me to volunteer, but I can volunteer here because they can avoid the library while I'm here. Like, nobody needs to know, which is hilarious. And so they will literally be, we have the one parent who their kid's reading day is a Monday, so they come on a Monday, so they see their kid. But then we have two parents, their kid's reading day is, Tuesday, so they come on Thursday, so that their kid doesn't have to see them. I mean, and the older they get, the more that separation happens. But people still want to be involved with their child's education. There's no more homeroom. There's not the homeroom mother, whatever. There's no, there aren't really dads with donuts, or, I mean, those things don't really exist in the same way. And so this is a great way for parents to come in to the building and still be involved. And it's just, honestly, it's just like with the kids. I do everything I can to constantly have a list of things that don't need doing but could be done, because you never want a kid or a volunteer to come and not have a task to feel that they've completed. And so sometimes it's a struggle, but I always try and have that kind of ongoing, even if it's just typing out book requests, just anything that I can have that doesn't take personality, doesn't take knowledge, that you can just have someone do. It's very important that you do that, because they stop coming back. I mean, the kids can't, they have no choice, but they get an attitude, but the parents will stop coming back.
Well, and something I discovered is, by the way, friends, you don't have to wait till the end of the school year to run your inventory.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I've been a big fan of not waiting until the end of the year to do that, but rather run your inventory exactly like you say. You're sort of in between things. You don't have a great deal coming up, but a lot of times the fun thing about inventory is that, you just sort of have a clipboard and keep track of which sections have been started, which ones haven't been tackled yet. And honestly, I had parents who loved doing inventory. And this is also where barcode placement is key, because if your barcode is on the inside of your book, you are quickly going to hate everything about inventory.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I know I'm going to, there are a lot of people who are going to push back on that, but I'm just going to say my parent volunteers love doing the inventory. And as long as their AirPods weren't on so high that they couldn't hear the beep, we're good. So, I love that you include your monthly plans. These are fantastic. It really helps break down and make sure that those definition of roles and responsibilities so that everybody knows what they're doing.
Well, yeah, and I never did answer part 2 and 3 of your question about the age, the ambassadors, and the genres. Um, so my ambassadors are strictly volunteers, right? So they are the kids who either decided they couldn't be an aide, or they had band and chorus and couldn't be an aide, or they found the library. Sometimes that just happens, right? In the 7th, 8th grade year, they suddenly find the library and they wish they'd been involved. And it is a strictly volunteer. They often will stay after school. Sometimes while we've had this flex time, it's been fun because I can invite them for that. I'm gonna miss that next year. And they do things like for example, we just had a Harry Potter camp. So every morning before school and then during our Thrive, they did all these Harry Potter activities. We made slime for potions. We had trivia. We had decorate your house. I mean, it was, but the kids created the whole thing. They did everything, right? And they do the bulletin boards. I'm going to have the aides help with that next year because we won't have this flex time. So that will make a difference. But yeah, so they do a lot, but it is strictly volunteer. It's the before school, after school kids. The genre genies, not quite sure what I'm going to do with them next year because there's no flex time. So that's going to have to evolve. But they're the ones who they each get assigned a genre and they look after that genre. It's as simple as that. They come tidy it up. They can create flyers. They can create review cards. They do the dynamic shelving. We do 2 sessions on how to do dynamic shelving and then another one later on. And they rotate the displays. And I can't rotate the displays every week. That's ridiculous, right? So even the ones that aren't as keen every month, the displays are rotated. A new book series is up on the top. And we all know that kids sort of walk in and grab what they see. And so it really has been a great way to move some of those books that I don't want to read because I know they're good, and all of a sudden they're out there, and the kids are reading them, which has been cool. So that's kind of the main grouping.
Now, remind me, because you did mention an element of social media that the students had some ownership over. Can you explain how that works in your space? Because I know for some people that is sort of a non-starter just from a sort of relinquishing that kind of control.
It works when it works. It's not so good now. So I just deleted TikTok for a variety of reasons, but we did have a lot of TikTok in there. In fact, you'll see on if anyone digs into my website and sees this slideshow, you'll see there's a year of TikTok. I assume they still show up because I downloaded them and put them together. But basically, I have the kids create videos, so it's not. They don't put them on social media. They don't put them anywhere. They create videos, and they're not always as creative as I'd like them to be. This is something that I feel like I really need to evolve this year. There's only so many times we can see the same series of books shown one after the other, falling over like dominoes or whatever. But they're having fun with it, bless them, and they're trying. But they are so excited when I would come in the TikTok days and say, "You got 1,000 views." Right? Like this was huge. I mean, this is so exciting. So kind of miss TikTok because of that. So we do have a media center Instagram account. So that's going to be kind of my thing next year. We're going to start kind of trying to amp it up a little bit here towards the end of the year to try and get them to create videos. But what matters to me is that they create the videos. I take them, I look at them, I decide what I'm going to say with them, and then they go online. So they often don't even know if they don't go online. I mean, typically I'll put them up even if they're not that great. Like at least we're putting something up there, right? But it is difficult too because I have a very strict no faces rule. So they are learning how to blur faces. They did a really good job of that with the blind date with a book. Because that's my rule. They can have voices but no faces. And I know not everyone does that, but that to me is, unless I go and ask every single parent, that just to me is how it is. And so, yeah, so they have complete creative run with it, but they don't actually post a thing. I post everything.
I love that you are clearly willing to make the kinds of changes that you need to anticipate the kinds of things that are out of your control. And I know that next year is going to definitely look different. I strongly encourage friends, please make time for this deep dive. Bridget is so generous in sharing so many of the things that you have. And, I know that you are also going to let us know how we can follow you and reach out to you, because invariably those of us, when we start to do those, if we want to recreate some of the success in our space that you have had in your space, it is awfully helpful to be able to connect the person who inspired this in the first place. So friends, I know that there are so many people who are incredibly generous and have given you the kind of inspiration that you have, Bridget, to do all the programming that you do. But for listeners who would love to reach out and connect with you and ask specific questions or follow you on social media, would you let us know the best way to find you?
For sure. Email, I prefer my personal email, which I know is going to be on the notes, but it's bryson.bridget@gmail.com. And I am pretty much just running with Blue Sky now, and that is at media-and-mayhem.bluesky, bsky.social.
Yes.
And if you're not on Blue Sky, it is really becoming huge for the library world at least. And they even have a live chat every Wednesday with a TL Sky teacher librarian Sky. So I will put a plug in for Blue Sky right there. And then also, I believe you'll have a link to my website on there, Amy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Friends, Blue Sky is, what library Twitter used to be, without the toxicity and without the trolls and without all of the angry that sort of found its way into what we were trying to accomplish on social media and library Twitter back in the day. So, Bridget, you are amazing. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the school year. I appreciate it's mid-February right now. We've got a ways to go, but I wish you the very best and happy 2025.
Thank you. And you too, Amy.
Friends, if you are curious as to how often your state and school librarians have been featured on the podcast, then check out the link in today's show notes for the search by title, guest, and location. My goal is to showcase school librarians from all 50 states and around the world. Take a look at our FAQs linked in today's show notes to answer all of your questions about recording an episode and reach out. Make 2025 the year that you are a guest on the podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Visit Learnix.com to learn more and to schedule a demo. Enjoy Learnix for the remainder of the year at half the price. And if you mention that you heard about Learnix on School Librarians United, you will receive 20% off your subscription. The topic of our next episode will be mentoring and retaining school librarians and my conversation with Becky Calzada. I hope you will tune in.